is Sharon Lorman. I am an MSW student, and this conversation is part of my Diversity, Racism, Oppression, and Privilege course. And my goal is not to ask anyone to speak on behalf of all transgender people, but to learn from one person's lived experience so I can become more knowledgeable, culturally humble, and an affirming social worker. And I'm grateful to my guests for generously sharing their time and perspective. So, Alessandra, thank you for speaking with me today. I really appreciate your willingness to share your experiences, and please know that you're welcome to skip any question that I ask you and stop the conversation at any time.
Thank you, Sharon.
Okay. So I would like to begin and ask you if you would be comfortable sharing a little bit about your journey in becoming a transgender person.
Absolutely. I like to put it as in stepping into my truth as a transgender woman. I always knew that I was a girl, even from childhood, from very, very young. I remember there were two things that I would pray for as a child. One of them was to wake up singing like Mariah Carey. The second one was that I would be able to awake in my truth as a little girl that I knew that I was.
So from your earliest memory?
From my earliest memories, I didn't have a word for it.
Wow.
I didn't have language for who and what I was. And I mean, I knew that there were people who lived like me just because I remember seeing them in my neighborhood. I remember being around 12 years old, and my father pointed out somebody and said, "What do you think of this person?" And she was a transgender young person. I mean, she was much older than I was, but she may have been in her 20s. "What do you think of that person?" And I said, "I don't think of her." But in reality, I thought of her a lot because she was closest to, somebody who resembled my authenticity. And, I fantasized about transitioning into my teen years, of what that would look like, and then disappearing, and they would never know who, my family, that is, or anybody who I had grown up with. They'd never know who I was because I'd be a completely different person, but I would be able to live in my truth. And I remember being around 18 years old when I met, I was 17 years old when I met my first transgender woman when I was working at the Gap.
Oh.
I had just started college, just moved into my dorms, and I transferred work to the Gap in Manhattan. It was a flagship store. And, she said, "I'm a femme queen." And I was like, "Oh, that's lovely." And she goes, "Do you know what that is?" And I said, "Are you a lesbian?" And she laughed from the pit of her stomach and she said, "No, I'm a trans," which back then they used this word, which is not correct at all. But she said, "I'm a transsexual." And I was like, oh. And it was the first time that I had met somebody who was employed, that was young.
And how old were you?
I was 17 years old at this moment.
And you dressed as a male. You were.
And at that time, I showed up into the world dressed as male, yes.
Okay.
And through that woman, I was able to build community and meet community where trans women were prevalent in a way that I had never experienced before. And I toyed with the idea of what that could look like for me, but my fear disallowed me from actually experiencing or stepping into. I didn't know how my family was going to take it or how I would survive without them.
Well, when your dad asked you that question, what do you think he was thinking? Did he have any clue of what was in your mind?
I think that my father was aware that there was something going on. I know that he had a conversation with my grandmother when I was about 3 years old. And I only found out when I came out as gay. That's the only word that I knew at 13. And my aunt said, "Oh, we've had this discussion. The family has had this discussion." And your father spoke to our mother, and your grandmother spoke to us and made sure that we were all prepared for one day you saying, I am this. And
Oh, great.
it was lovely.
Yeah.
It was so
So
beautiful,
open.
you know, but I mean, it was open within that at that moment, but beyond that, we weren't really able to have full discussions.
Was that in what year about? What?
That was 1993.
19.
That was 1993.
Okay, so early 90s. When you think about, that was still the AIDS crisis, right,
Yeah,
in Manhattan?
Absolutely. And it was so, I remember being 13 and coming out, and that was the big fear, like, you know, you can get this disease
Right.
and all of those things. So yeah, absolutely.
Wow, thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that. So what I would like to know is, from the people that you know and yourself, if you've ever worked with a therapist, what made you feel respected and supported by a therapist?
Absolutely. I think it's important for therapists to be able to listen, right? And when somebody tells you who they are, to believe them. I think that that's the most important thing. So often people will try to insert their own beliefs or what they believe that they understand about a individual based on their prior experience or prior knowledge with a certain demographic. And one of the things that when I do presentations for mental health providers or anybody who is working with either our young people or our gender expansive community members, is that when somebody tells you who they are, believe them. Mm-hmm. Ask them what that means to them, and then allow them to tell you their truth. Because words they're just used so differently, right? Like they're always evolving. The community is always creating new terms for how they identify. And it's something that it could be difficult. It could be uncomfortable for somebody who's already feeling like they don't know enough about this specific demographic.
Right.
But I'll tell you, as somebody who is a member of the LGBTQ plus community, as a trans woman, I was also raised in a very binary world, right? So in my world, there was men and women, and whether you were trans or cisgender,
right.
you were either men or women. So when being introduced to the idea, the concept of non-binary, I was very taken aback. Okay. Because it was outside of my understanding, and it took for me to be open and willing to see beyond myself. And when I met somebody who identified as non-binary and I allowed them to tell me their truth, I was like, but of course, why wouldn't you be Veda? Why wouldn't you be non-binary? And at that moment, I realized that even with my own gender expansivity, I had reservations or I had limitations in my beliefs and understanding purely based on my own individual experience.
And what would you say, that was probably in the 2000s, in the mid?
So no, that was in yes, definitely the 2000s, but it was within the last maybe 11 years.
Okay. So it is always changing.
It's always changing. Like the idea of a non-binary people have always existed.
Right, but
we just didn't.
I grew up in the 70s,
Mm-hmm.
and it was male or female.
Yeah, so we grew up in a binary world.
Right.
And they still existed. They just didn't have the language to say this is who I am.
Right.
Where I think that within the last,
hid it maybe because people were not accepting.
And there was no language for it, or there was no language that we understood for it. In the last 10 to 15 years, gender expansivity, trans people, we have been able to live in a way in society that we have never been able to live before. We're able to show up in our authenticity at home, at work, at schools, in a ways that we've never been able to before. Our lives are no longer in the shadow.
So what do you think, what sources of support do you think have been the most helpful to you as a teenager and in your 20s?
Yeah, as a teenager, I had an amazing pediatrician who brought me to my first youth group when I was about 13 years old, and that was super duper important for me. But even then, it wasn't everything that I needed. I don't think I was able to find the support that I needed until I was in the city and at school, where I met the community from GMAC and the ballroom scene and all of those things, where I started doing outreach with GMAC to hand out condoms and safer sex kits to our vulnerable and higher crisis community members. I found my purpose.
Did you grow up
there?
Where?
I grew up here in Rockland.
In Rockland?
Yeah.
But it was really until you moved
It
to
was not
Manhattan.
until I stepped into Manhattan
In
that I was
college
able,
years.
in college years, where I found my tribe, I found my purpose, I found my standing as a member of the LGBTQ plus community. But even within that newfound confidence, there was a lot of doubt and insecurities when it came to my existence as a trans woman. It wasn't until I was in my 30s that I finally was like, I can't deny this part of my life any longer.
Okay, so you hadn't transitioned until your 30s.
Oh no, it was in my 30s that I socially transitioned at 33, and I started chemically transitioning at 38. And it was like little bits, baby steps, slow and steady won the race. I started with patches, and then once I stopped smoking, I transitioned into injections and so on and so forth. So the journey has been a slow and steady process throughout my life, where there are so many people who are so fortunate to be able to tread a road that has already been paved for them. I had to figure out a lot of things on my own, and it wasn't until I found a doctor who became my primary doctor. And she said, have you ever thought about starting this journey for yourself? Because we had the conversations, and she was able to see the fear and all of the things, and she was so patient and so kind and so supportive. And she was the one who, little by little, we started the journey into my medical transition. And now, so many years later, I can say that I'm living my life as a trans woman in a way that is honoring of who I am, and I love it. I love being who I am. I love living in my truth. There is nothing better that I have ever experienced in this life than being my authentic self.
You can't follow them. So let me ask you this. Let's see. Is there any advice you could give to a future social worker, other than listening, and when someone tells you, believe them?
Yeah, I think that's the most important part. Everything else is things that come along with the turf of doing that job, right? Like, you have to have the empathy in order to do that job.
How difficult is it for the people that come, the youth that come here to the Pride Center, to find the medical person?
Oh, it's not difficult at all. So we have an amazing director of health and wellness. So if anybody is ever looking for a mental health provider, we know who to refer them to that does this specific type of care. We work with the families. So in my program, I work with young people, yes, but I also work with the school districts. I work with their clinicians at the school districts, and I also work with their mental health providers, as well as the parents. So every step of the way, this young person is finding their support, not only here at the Pride Center, but we are supporting the parents so that they can know the best practices to support their young people, as well as the schools and the clinicians at their school so that they can also know what the game plan is. And I can say that right now, I'm very proud of all of our young people. Our young people are thriving in a way that I could only have dreamed of as a young person. And a lot of the things that we have created for this program are based on the things that we needed as young people, that myself and the people around me, I took into consideration a lot of the things that we went without in order to make sure that our kids had everything that they needed. So, I mean, our job is literally just to provide them with the tools that they need in order to be healthy and thriving adults. You know, the program has been an amazing success. I'm really, really proud of the work that I get to do with my amazing colleagues. I have to definitely mention, if I'm going to be speaking about my work, I could not have done this without Amanda Roman, who has been with me from day one, Callie Racinos and Jessie Garcia, who are Healthy Futures. They do a lot of like healthy body conversations for our young people. Lauren Klein, who is the Director of Health and Wellness, he is a godsend. Like, he is so amazing. He has been able to connect families with all of the resources that they need and has built the relationship with the mental health providers in the county and beyond, right? In order to make sure that if we have a niche situation where a young person has a very specific thing that they're looking for, Lauren is more than likely going to connect them to the proper mental health resources.
Amazing, amazing. Really. Thank you.
Thank you.
I live in Bergen County, so I was happy to hear that people come from Bergen. And are there groups for parents here?
So we have a number of groups for parents. We have the transparent group that meets here at the Pride Center or over Zoom. And that is led by Chris Hillen, who's a fantastic colleague also. And we have a really amazing connection to P-Flag Rockland. And the parents of our young people are incredible. What P-Flag Rockland has been able to do in the support of our LGBTQ plus youth has been really, really amazing.
So is there anything that I didn't ask you about that you think would be helpful in my journey to become a more knowledgeable, anti-oppressive?
Absolutely. I think the one thing, especially when working with young people, remind them that they're going to live good lives. Remind them that they're valuable members of society and that they matter and that they count. And, you know, always tell them, like, the possibilities are endless for you. You can do everything and anything that your heart desires. If you want to be something, be that. Or be as close to that as you want it to be. One of the things that I like to do with my young people who are in crisis is, let's start dreaming about what our lives are going to be like. Like, what does your life look like in 15 to 20 years? Where do you live? What does that look like? Who are you living there with? What kind of car do you drive? Like, envisioning what your life could be like changes everything, because now you have a belief that you can attain something that felt like it wasn't attainable.
Just a couple more questions. In social work school, we talk a lot about self-care. And I was wondering, what do you do for self-care? And what do you recommend? Yeah,
definitely. My self-care is great. I love getting up in the morning. I do a gratitude prayer in the morning that I really, really love. I go to the gym. I go to yoga and Pilates, and that makes me happy. I love to cook. My life is simple, and I think that that's something that, had you asked me as a young person, I don't know if I could have said that I could have seen or foreseen that happening. But as a trans adult, my life is soft, it's magical. I do the things that I want to do. I take myself out to dinner when I want to. I have amazing friends that I can connect with, not often enough or as much as I would like to, because life gets in the way of so many things, but my self-care is extremely important. I go get my nails done.
Yeah. I just did that today.
So my self-care includes a lot of that. Some journaling. I take a couple of classes for myself, not because of my profession, but just for like personal growth classes, and that makes me happy. So yeah, do things that make you happy. I think that's my suggestion to people who are looking for self-care things to do.
Well, I agree about the gym. I think it's life-changing.
It is. Yeah. It is, definitely.
And I just have one more question. I saw a wonderful documentary called Will and Harper. And it was when Will Ferrell traveled across country with his friend who transitioned later in life, and it was very moving. And I was wondering if you've seen it and what your thoughts were.
I have. It's a beautiful documentary. It was a needed and important conversation to have. And Will Ferrell was so amazing as an ally to his friend Harper. Harper is such a dreamboat of a woman. She was just so magical, and to see her with her kids, and when you meet one trans person, you're meeting one trans person.
Right.
And the way that she was able to show up into her world and into her life in a truth that felt magical to her and that honored her presence on this earth unapologetically. And she shared her vulnerabilities, and she shared her insecurities, because one of the things about being human, I always say being human is the hardest thing that we'll ever do. And then you add the intersectional parts that society, society reacts differently to. It makes it more complicated. And she was able to navigate many of those things in ways that were so beautiful for her.
I recommend it.
Oh, absolutely.
When I was just thinking, what do you think are, let's say, the strongest systemic barriers right now that trans people face?
So I think the largest systemic barrier that we're experiencing right now is the attempted erasure of transness. We have become the scapegoat. We are constantly in the mouths of those who are trying to manipulate society by fear-mongering and making people afraid of us. And we're low-hanging fruit. It's so easy to take advantage of the most vulnerable members of society. Do we want to be that? Absolutely not. I know many trans people, and we walk with our heads held high because we are strong and we are resilient. And yet, the constant invalidation, the constant attack on our personhood, it's a lot. It's a lot. We're just like anybody else. And I hate to even have to say that, because people should already know that as humans, we are just like everybody else. But
it's one part of your identity. There's so many other parts of you. Everyone is an individual. So anyway, I really thank you so much. It's a pleasure meeting you. And I want to thank Azu.
Aw, thank you, Azu. Thank you so much, Sharon.
I'm so grateful to you.
Anytime, literally.
Thank you.